I think 1978 was an important year because in the United States there was a backlash against the rights that gay men and lesbians had secured. I mean, there weren't that many, there were relatively few, but the conservative right was fighting against it. There was a request by a group in the United States to have a kind of a celebration march or something like that. And what happened in 1978 was that there were two political events organized, a morning march and an afternoon forum, and there was also a Mardi Gras in the evening. Now, there's been some discussion as to the nature of Mardi Gras, whether it was political or not. The reality is it took place in the gay male ghetto along Oxford Street, and obviously the majority of people would have been gay men from the bars. So that's how it started, and the book came about because in 1998 I attended the 20th anniversary of Sydney's first gay Mardi Gras. I found out that someone I knew had passed away, and I thought of writing a kind of a history, but at that stage what I had in mind was a history of celebration. As I did my interviews with various activists, I realized that there were different stories, and I came to the appreciation that there was a great deal of revisionism. All the small groups, those on the left of left, were trying to create Mardi Gras in their own image. So what I tried to do is really talk about Mardi Gras based on the interviews, but not only on the interviews, but also on the documents that were available.
But despite all this, we find that gays are still facing harsh realities, not just in Australia, but even more so overseas.
I think we've got to recognise that we are not living in a perfect world, okay? We cannot say, for example, that discrimination against people of ethnic background has disappeared. There's obviously always some kind of discrimination, but I think we must not exaggerate the position in Australia. I think Australians have generally been very much welcoming of ethnic people and even of gay men and lesbians. I mean, when you have lived, in the movement for as long as I have, you can see the difference. I think our biggest problem, though, is that we need to look away from Australia. We need to find out what's happening in other countries. As you well know, I work as a lawyer and I do some migration work, quite a lot of migration work, in fact, and some of that migration work involves people who are refugees and who are claiming refugee status on the basis of their sexuality. Some gay men, lesbians, and members of the wider LGBTI community are really suffering overseas, and I think that's probably been one of our major failings in Australia as far as the gay movement is concerned.
Now, nowadays Mardi Gras is a celebration of the gay identity and sexuality. But there are a lot of critics still who say, why do you have to go and parade your sexuality in, Sydney's main road? We don't do it. What's your response to that? Well,
the response is very, very simple. I think people who say that really do not understand what the movement is all about. I came out in late 1972. In late 1972, it was very difficult to find a book on homosexuality that was not in some way prejudiced against us. Since then, we have literature that has flourished. We have many other areas that have become very, very supportive. But I think the important thing is it's no longer acceptable in Australia to be homophobic. And why do we go and celebrate our sexuality? Why wouldn't you celebrate your sexuality when you have made all these gains over 40 years? I mean, in many ways, we have changed Australia. We have changed ourselves too. And why not? The person who launched the book was Michael Kirby. Michael Kirby was the first gay man who was a judge on the High Court. Also present at that launch was Mary Goodron, who was the first female High Court judge. We had the Assistant Police Commissioner of New South Wales. I had about 3 MPs, a member of the Sydney Local Council. So why shouldn't we celebrate? In fact, Michael Kirby made the comment about the police commissioner. He noted that he came to the launch in all his regalia. That would not have happened in 1978. That is why we celebrate. We celebrate to tell people that there's nothing wrong with being gay, and I think those who are coming after us, they need to have role models.
This is definitely not your first book. I'm holding here two of your previous books as well, Queer Mediterranean Memories and Il Tipo Rosa, that was quite controversial in Malta.
In Australia, I'm generally accused of being conservative. In Malta, I'm accused of being radical. So I must be somewhere in the middle. I must be doing something right, I think. Il Tipo Rosa was, of course, terribly important. It was important because at that stage, homosexuality was not on the agenda, on the national agenda. And it was launched on Live FM, on Il Parlamento al Popolo, with Emi Benzina. The person who launched it was the present Minister of Education, Everest Bartolo. That in itself was quite controversial. I think 1994 is when I first appeared in Piazza Atleta, and that was also was quite controversial. And I remember when I finished, Lou Bondi was actually the one who interviewed me. When we finished the program, someone came and said, "There's a group of men waiting for you outside the studio in Guadalajara." And I said, "Good God, here we go." So I went there, ready to have a fight with them, a verbal fight with them, only to find a group of gays had turned up to sort of support me. From there, Lou Bondi and I went, and a number of others went to have a pizza at Parcheville. We couldn't believe the response. Families would gathered around us, to congratulate us. And then it was after that I realized there was a need to put out something like Il Tipo Rosa.
What about Queer Mediterranean Memories? Now, that was controversial, very controversial actually, because you mentioned quite a few historical Maltese names. How did you come out of that?
Well, look, I mean, when you write, I know that I'm writing in an area that's controversial, and if you don't get controversy, there's a problem. I didn't go out to create a controversy, but at the same time, I didn't mind it.
But it helps as well.
Absolutely. Why should people, why should gay men and lesbians in Malta not know or be completely ignorant of their gay past? What that book did, I think, it did a number of things. I think in many ways it saved the subculture that existed in Balzonetta, in Floriana, and also Straight Street. Many of those drag queens have died. No one has kept any records. I'm the only one who kept any records, and they're there. You also have seen, photos of cooking here, because this is the Malta gay room.
Exactly. So this is tell us more about this room.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you something about Cookie. Cookie, his name was Carmenu Preca, and I think Don George Preca was the brother of his grandfather.
Right.
Okay. He lived in Floriana. This is what I call the Malta gay room. I've got a letter over there by
Mabel
Strickland, sorry, my mind went blank. And that's a letter addressed to my father. My father used to be the night editor of Alberta before we came to Australia. And
so speaking of your father is?
George Chetcuti.
George Chetcuti, yeah.
And my uncle, of
very
course,
well
is Jose.
And Jose Chetcuti, very well known.
Okay. And my father used to say a number of things, and I think a lot of people, a lot of straight men and straight women, give us hints without realizing. And my father occasionally would say, Mabel didn't like men, or something like that, and you put all these things together and you know exactly what they really meant without actually meaning it. But many of these photos I actually gathered from a number of drag queens. Cookie gave me a number of photos. So, the history is there, but anyone who writes the history of gay life in Malta, they've got to get their hands dirty. They've got to go and ask these people, especially people who many in Malta would regard as belonging to the lower working classes, because it is these people who actually have the information that is relevant. And, most of them are the best people you can ever meet.
Now tell us more about this Maltese flag that I've got behind me.
Yeah, the Maltese flag that you have behind you is the one that I carried on the 20th anniversary of Sydney's first gay Mardi Gras. And that was important, of course, because it also created criticism. Some people turned around and said, you know...
You're very prone to criticism, Joseph.
They said, why should that man be, you know, that gay man be carrying the Maltese flag at the Mardi Gras parade? But, you know, why shouldn't I? I'm Maltese like everyone else. In fact, you know, when you come to Australia, it's probably more likely that you are more Maltese than some of them back home, because we tend to appreciate what we left behind. A lot of the people in Malta take what they have for granted.
Joseph, if we go back to that walk in the park in 1978, what does it mean to you as a out and proud Maltese Australian gay activist and as an author?
I think if I look, you know, at myself in a mirror, I see a lot of things. I see someone who has changed. I wouldn't say changed for the better, but I think I am more honest, more truthful to myself. I mean, there was a time not so long ago when I was aspiring to be a priest, and over there is a photo of me wearing the Franciscan conventual habit. I managed to take the simple vows. I'm not in any way disappointed or ashamed of my past. In fact, I'm proud of it. I think going through the church and going through the studies in theology and philosophy has really helped me to accept myself, which is a strange thing to say. But I'm also here as a lawyer. You know, I'm an openly gay lawyer. I can live this life because of what happened in the 1970s. I can celebrate the people who were basically my colleagues, who were fellow fighters in the vineyard of gay and lesbian liberation. As I indicated to you today, I came out in late 72. By 73, I was already open. I was a contributor to a very small publication called Homosexuals Report Back. And I haven't stopped being an activist in different ways. I mean, I'm no longer running around the streets and screaming, ho, 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 homosexual. We don't need that.
That's right.
Well, in some cases we do. But, you know, I can live my own life. But even when you come out, because coming out is a journey. I remember in 1994 when I appeared on Piazza Tlita, I had to go through the process of coming out again, because that was in Malta, and not everybody knew me. I remember my uncle Joseph Chetcuti warning me, you know, not to get involved in the program. So I decided to go, and that really changed my profile completely.